Hi, this is Mr. Boyer with Reedley College. Welcome to Introduction to Web Programming for IS-15. In this presentation, we're going to look at the World Wide Web and the origins of what's known as the Hypertext Transport Protocol and the Hypertext Markup Language, which is used to program the web. The World Wide Web began with Hypertext Transport Protocol back in 1989 at CERN, which is the European Organization for Nuclear Research. So as you can imagine by the name, a lot of heavy-duty research went on there. Now, prior to the World Wide Web, if you as a scholar, you as a student wanted to do research and you wanted to look up information, most items at that time were on paper, or they were on microfiche or microfilm, so you had to have physical media and you had to look that up. It was a very tedious and long and drawn out process. Today we take it for granted that we can simply click on a link and see information just pop up from all over the world. And so we really are truly in the information age just by virtue of the fact that we have all this information that's available to us that maybe 30 years ago wasn't. So, or it was not as easily available. So at CERN, Tim Berners-Lee, a researcher, thought it would be great if one could publish a document and instead of simply having footnotes or annotations within the paper that would tell you what the paper was and where to go get it, that would actually take you to that page. And now in this period of time, a lot of those papers were no longer written by hand or on a typewriter, but were beginning to be typed quite often on computer, and they were in word processing documents. So Tim Berners-Lee created the Hypertext Transport Protocol, which you know today as HTTP, and you see that every day when you access websites. The HTTP:// means that the location given after that / points to a hypertext document. Just means a document that you can open up and you can link to it. The Hypertext Transport Protocol is how browsers send commands to servers and how the server will return information to browsers. It'll let you open web pages, transfer files, view images, listen to music, watch videos, chat, instant message, send email, you name it. Everything can be done through HTTP. Now there are some other resources out there. For example, if instead of HTTP you type file, then the resource you're accessing is a file and it's handled a little bit differently. But in this case, we're only going to focus on HTTP and HTML. Now, HTML stands for the Hypertext Markup Language. It's the Hypertext Markup Language, and it's the basis of all web coding. Now, HTML came first, but that doesn't mean that there aren't other languages and other things that are used on the web. There's actually quite a large assortment of languages that do different things on the web. But the three main languages that any web developer needs to know are HTML, which HTML provides the framework for a web page. It's the most basic document, and in the early days, that was the only language that was spoken on the early web. And it was very limited. Mostly it could provide some formatting, display some pictures, just like the ubiquitous cat pictures, and take you to different links. And that was about it. Later on, even the formatting of HTML was very basic. You could do some colors and do the basic font styles such as bold and italic and underline, and you could input you could put different pictures in and do some basic borders, and web pages looked Well, they looked great at the time, but if you look at an early web page now, it's pretty obvious that there's a lot missing. So CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets. It's just another language that you can find either within a web page or a separate CSS sheet that's linked to that web page that defines how the web page appears or how it looks. It's about the look and the feel. And finally, there's JavaScript. That's the muscles. That's what actually makes the web page do something. And we're going to learn a little bit more about CSS and JavaScript later. You'll learn a little bit about CSS in the Web B assignment, and then in the programming assignment, we're going to play a little bit with JavaScript and maybe use a little bit of CSS as well. So again, the triad is that web coding is mainly made up of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Okay, so HTML began as HTML tags and was first mentioned by Tim Berners-Lee in 1991. And it defined formatting such as underline, emphasis, or italic, strong text or bold text, and links to other documents. That was really about it. It was very basic, and as a matter of fact, the first web browsers were text-based. There were no images. If you wanted to view an image, you had to download that image and then display it with a separate program. And you might say that HTML is the first language of the web. HTML tags mark text to add formatting and links to define sections. Most, but not all tags have an opening and a closing tag. For example, everything after the bold tag, or this B in the greater than less than sign in a text, will be formatted as bold until the /B tag is encountered to turn it off. So if you look over at the example here, in this proper code, I'm going to change the color to orange. In this proper code, we see over here, it shows that this is, and then you see the B tag, bold, and then the closing tag, text. The rest should not be formatted. And if you look at the result, you see only the word bold is formatted that way. The problem code down here. Okay, this is bold text, and it only has the opening B tag right here. Okay, and notice that there's no /B here, so the rest of the text should not be formatted yet. When you look at the result, it is. Okay, look at all this down here. This is all bad right here. What that means is you forgot to turn off the bold. It's just like when you're in a word processor and you forget to turn off the bold. Everything that you type after that is bold, and you have to go back and highlight it and change it. In the web page, you have to go in and edit the text. This happens quite often to early beginning web coders. So don't forget to close that out. If you're having a problem with your web page, a lot of times it's just forgetting something like that. Another is this greater than sign, which is a closing brace. You have to make sure that you enclose your tags in these braces here. Okay, one other thing to point out real quick. Tags like the line break tag and the image tag do not have a closing tag since they insert an object. For the few tags that I give you, I'll let you know which ones have closing tags and don't. And in our example, I'll point those out. If you're looking up your own tags, say from the W3 Schools site, they will normally tell you in the documentation whether or not you need to use a closing tag. Okay, let's talk about some common HTML tags. You have different types of tags. One of them is an element tag. An element tag, right up here, the element tag is one that defines part of a web page or an element within a web page. So the head, and notice the way that I've written these here. Okay, I've shown you the opening and the closing tag. That's just kind of shorthand. It's a convention that I'm using here to indicate that the tag has an opening and a closing. Okay, so the head tag, let's talk about that one. It formats text at the head of a document. It's not a heading that you see, and it contains background information about the document. So it may list some things like who wrote the web page, if there are any problems, who to contact. It might tell you some things about the languages that are used, the scripting languages that are used inside the web page. It contains all kinds of information for network engineers and even some stuff that servers and browsers look for to know how to display the page properly. Again, we'll use this a little bit in our web pages. Not a whole lot, but we'll use it a little bit. Probably use it a lot more when we do programming. So pay attention to that. Just understand the head tag is something you don't see, but it's kind of the head or the brain of the web page. Okay, the title tag. Title tag is important too. It sets the title of the page that's seen at the top of the browser. So if you look at a browser, look up at the top, right in the top of the tab, or if you only have one tab, or maybe you're just using an older browser that has just the window at the very top of that window, it'll have the title of the web page you're looking at. Okay, another element tag. This is kind of a formatting tag really, but it falls under the element tags, and these are the headings tags. Now I show H1 and close H1, but really there's 6 levels of headings, and it's kind of like setting the font, but it's in an outline format. So H1 is going to be the top level, and it's going to be the biggest. It's almost like a title. H2 is maybe the first major section. H3 is a subsection within that. H4 is a subsection or a subsection. H5 is a subsection, and H6 is a subsection. And they get progressively smaller, but they are just a little bit different than the normal paragraph text. So think of them as levels of an outline. All right, another type of tags are presentation tags. Presentation tags simply show what or how the text is displayed, or how an image is displayed. One of the tags, and these are just some examples here, are the bold or the strong. Now, let me point something out. You're going to say, well, Boyer, why are there 2 different kinds? This B tag is a deprecated tag. It means it's old and it's not really correct anymore, but most browsers will still display it anyway for compatibility. So we could use the strong tag. In our examples, we'll probably use the old deprecated tags. Just know that at some point in the future, they may not be good. If you get into web development, you'll learn those. So for what we're doing here, it's just as easy to remember the B, and then again, the /I for italics, and that's really about it. Another tag here is the marked text tag. Everything between the opening and closing tags. So here's the opening tag, here's the closing tag. Everything in between the mark and the /mark tag will be highlighted. So it'll be marked just like you're highlighting a textbook. The BR tag, notice it's by itself. It inserts a break in text. In other words, it gives you a blank line. It does not use a closing tag. Okay, a couple more really fun tags. These are really involved, so pay attention. Okay, the first one is the A tag. That's a hyperlink. That's one of the most useful tags in probably the thing that made the web what it is the A tag. And it, I think if I recall correctly, it stood for anchor. And it creates a hyperlink. You can link text or images. Anything that you can display on the screen, you can create a link with. So an example here is down below, and I've color-coded this to kind of help it make sense a little bit. In the example, here's the code right here, and it says this is, and then I have the A tag, and then you'll notice there's a red thing in here that says href equals. That's the hyperreference. Hyperreference, and then in quotation marks, http://www.google.com/ and then close the quotation. And then, very important, close this tag right back here. What that does is it says all the text after this is linkable. It's a link, and it's going to link to uh, www.google.com. So it's going to go to that link, and it's a link to Google. And then if you notice on our presentation here, it says this is a link to Google. And so the code that you see in the first line creates the hypertext that you would see on the second line. Okay. So everything after this first A tag is linked. And then when you want that link to stop, you have to close it with that /A. This right here, very important. I'm going to tell you right now, a lot of students run into problems where they're creating their first or their second project, and you have multiple links and you have a lot of text in there. And if you forget to turn one of those links off, the entire rest of your web page becomes one giant link. And it's frustrating because you're like, why doesn't it work? And you say, Mr. Boyer, why doesn't it work? And if you were in a brick and mortar class, it'd be real easy for me to look over your shoulder and go, hey, you think you missed something? A closing tag somewhere? Unfortunately, I'm not there to tell you that. So please look at this. Okay, if you're listening to this video or watching this video, if you're listening to me talk, you're probably doing this on your own. Make sure that you look for those closing tags. Okay, the image tag. Image tag is fun. Notice it's also by itself. It inserts an image, but there's no closing for it. So arguments in the tag will specify the image location and formatting. Some examples. The first example right here. Let me find another one. Let me find another. Here we go. Okay, this example right here. Well, let's go ahead and undo that. Cool. Okay, definitely don't like that one. Let's try this color. Okay, this is much better. Okay, image source equals, and then in quotation marks, image.jpg. That displays the picture labeled image.jpg contained in the same directory as the HTML file. This is going to be really important. Remember the video on zip files? Remember all the warnings that I put in there and all the text? Yeah, guess what? Your HTML file that creates your web page and an image like this has to be in the same folder. If it doesn't end up that way, it just won't work. That's another place where students often run into trouble. Okay. Another example here, I'm going to use yellow this time, I think. Actually, let's go back to orange. I like Reedley orange. Okay, this next one right here, image source equals https://Reedley College edu/_files/images/header logo.png. Okay, that extension .png stands for portable network graphic. Just means it's a picture image. Same thing, an image file. And this one goes to the Reedley College website. It goes into one of the folders that's contained in the website on the web server, and it finds that header logo.png. So I don't have to have images that are in the same folder. I just have to point the directory, or I have to point to the directory where it's contained. It might be within the same folder on the same local machine, just like the websites you're creating, or it might be somewhere else on the web. Just be careful. If you don't have control over that image, if somebody changes that website, you're not going to be able to, you're not going to tell, you're not going to be able to fix it. Okay, and the third example down here, image source equals me.jpg, good. Okay, and so this goes to the same directory that the web page is in, pulls up me.jpg, but then the rest of this tells the web browser how to display it. It says first, give it alt text. In other words, alt text if somebody has a bad internet connection, or maybe somebody is visually impaired. They can't see that image, but they have a screen reader to tell them what that image is. The alt text describes the picture to them. So This me.jpg might be a picture of me, so the alt text says this is a picture of Mr. Boyer. And then the next argument, width equals 150, height equals 150. What that means is I'm going to make this picture, no matter what size it is, it might be 1,000 pixels in each direction, but I'm going to shrink it. I'm going to resize it so that it's 150 pixels tall and 150 pixels or wide. I may not always want to do that, and I'll explain why perhaps in another lesson. Sometimes you just want to specify the width or the height. That way you let the browser figure out how to make the image the correct height or width to maintain the same aspect ratio. In other words, so it doesn't get all scrunched up or doesn't get all stretched out and look kind of funny. And then finally, this border argument right here tells it to put a 1 pixel wide border in the default black color all the way around that image. Okay, got all that? Good. Okay, so that's it. I'm going to have you now go to the YouTube video that explains how to do your first project. If you need to, if you want to understand these tags a little more, come back, go through this presentation again. I'll make the presentation itself also available on your in the course. This is Mr. Boyer. Goodbye.